Kicking off our session this afternoon is someone that's not new to SAMA. In fact, he perennially rates as one of the highest, if not highest, speaker at SAMA. He's a master facilitator for Shapiro Negotiations Institute and has worked with clients as diverse as Bristol-Myers Squibb, J.P. Mellon Chase, Comcast, and even the Chicago Bears. But based on how much the Chicago Bears gave up in this year's draft, I'd say they may need a refresher. So with that, please join me in welcoming to the stage on a top about unleashing the influence power for individual relationships, Jeff Cochran of Shapiro.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Appreciate it.
Thank you to you, and thank you to SAMA for affording us this opportunity to talk about a topic that I think is becoming more and more prevalent. I'm coming to you from the Shapiro Negotiations Institute. And at the Shapiro Negotiations Institute, obviously, we talk a lot about negotiation. Well, you know what? The world's changing a little bit. Negotiation sort of implies I have something you want, you have something I want, and let's work out some type of deal. Influencing, a little more subtle. You know, it's not always a tit for tat, a quid pro quo. We have to influence a lot of folks along the way, especially in a complex sale where, you know what, maybe we don't always have something to offer the other side. But we still need their buy-in, and we still need them to help us achieve our goal. So if we can start off, one of the things that I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with a little, maybe a little quiz for folks. And I'm going to present to you a scenario, and I'm going to ask you to think about which choice you would make. I'm going to give you two choices, choice one or choice two. So what is this scenario? Well, it's about a woman I know, and her name is Linda. And Linda is 31 years old. She's single, she's outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. How would you best define Linda? Now, we all have a little inner voice that we're consulting right now. Should it be number one or should it be number two? Some of you who are a little more cynical are sitting there thinking, I don't have an inner voice. Yeah, that's the challenge. You were just talking to it. By show of hands, though, how many folks would pick number one? Linda is a bank teller. Okay, interesting. How many folks would pick number two? Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. Yeah, it looks like, just from the participants I've seen, unofficial poll, looks about half and half. You know, we've done this all over the world, and one of the things that we've uncovered is typically 68% of the people choose number two. It's interesting. And yet, choice number two is the emotional choice. It's the intuitive choice, but it's not the logical choice. In fact, if you look at the choices, you know, the number of bank tellers versus the number of people who are active in the feminist movement, well, even if there are more bank tellers and fewer folks active in the feminist movement, there's even fewer who are both. In fact, number two is just a slight sliver. Why would we assign Linda to the least likely spot? Now, we've done this all over the place, and I've talked to people, and they've said, you know what, I love this example because, you know, when you look at this example, even though I know that number two is the wrong choice, I can't help thinking I'm right. Kind of funny. Now, why do we make that decision? We make that decision because most of us make our decisions emotionally. However, when we go in to sell and persuade and influence individuals, we start off with logic. How many of us start off with the spec sheet? Let me tell you why my product is better. The service reports. Let me tell you why my service is superior. Kind of interesting. So we came up with a model, and some of our learning objectives is following the model. And in this model, we start with the first step is to build credibility. The second step, engage emotion. It's only the third step when we start to demonstrate logic. And finally, the last step is to try to facilitate action. Now, look, I wish we were smart enough to come up with this on our own. In fact, this process is as old as when Aristotle came up with it in his talks about influence and persuasion. You know, he talked about building credibility, ethos. It's all about what you believe. And we say people deal with people they like and who are like them because of their ethos. Engage emotions. He talks about pathos. We need to dig in and find out what the emotional response is. People deal on emotion, then they have to justify it rationally. If you chose number 2, Linda's a bank teller and she's involved in the feminist movement, you could easily make an argument. Yeah, but based on the information that you gave me, that was the logical choice. It wasn't the scientifically logical choice, but it was my gut choice. The choice I made based on the other information that you gave to me. Demonstrate logic. He talks about ethos, pathos, and logos. People need to understand the consequences of their action or inaction. If they understand those consequences, you know, that's a logical argument. And then finally, we added, as great as Aristotle might have been, I don't think he was selling much. So we added the third component for any of us who are out there trying to sell. Agreement without action is just a conversation. Have you ever had agreement? I agree. This is a great product. I agree. It's the cheapest one on the market. I agree. It even comes in the color you like. I agree. Do you want one? No. Because again, the facilitation for if we go through the process without facilitating action, that's often what happens. So let's start with the first one, building credibility. How do we do that? Well, we have to demonstrate or borrow expertise. Many of us are experts in our field. Many of us are not experts in our field, but we have access to experts in our field. How do we demonstrate or borrow that expertise? Use statements against self-interest. People are not always interested when they feel you're out for yourself. And of course, create the liking effect. Well, what does all that look like? Demonstrating the borrowing expertise. Has anybody here, just by show of hands, ever heard of Feltman's German Gardens? It was a place in Coney Island years ago where you could get really good hot dogs. You could get the best hot dogs in town, and they were 10 cents a piece. You know, Feltman's German Gardens was the place to go if you liked hot dogs. And then one of his employees, a gentleman named Nathan Handwerker, he got a little bit disgruntled at Feltman's, and he went across the street and he opened up his hot dog stand, Nathan's Hot Dogs. And he said, you know what? I think I can cut costs, and I can sell those exact same 10-cent hot dogs for 5 cents. He opened up his doors expecting a horde of people to come buy his cheap hot dogs. No one showed up. In fact, the price might have been one of the impediments. I mean, if he's making the same hot dogs, but he's making them for 5 cents, what do you think he's making them out of? That became a challenge. So Nathan had to borrow some expertise. He needed some experts. So he went to the local hospital, and he found all the doctors who at that time were wearing white lab coats. And he said, any of you doctors who come to Nathan's, I'll give you a free hot dog as long as you're wearing your white lab coat. Soon there were lines of guys in white lab coats at Nathan's waiting for their free hot dogs. All of a sudden, the public perception changed. Nathan's hot dogs at 5 cents were a pretty good deal. Well, you know, the thing is, Feltman's German Gardens went out of business in 1952. We hear about Nathan every 4th of July when he holds his hot dog eating contest. You know, what did Nathan do? He didn't have a lot of expertise. He borrowed expertise, and he demonstrated it. The next one, statements against self-interest. I think we're all familiar with statements against self-interest. People are more likely to find you more credible when you perceive you to be honest. How many times have you had success starting out a conversation? Let me come into your organization. We'll look things through. We might not be a good fit for you. You know, it's a way to get in the door. You know who else uses statements against self-interest? Some of you remember the advertisements for the Volkswagen Beetle. You know, the Volkswagen Beetle made a comeback recently, but when it first came out, it was not a very popular car. It was manufactured by one of our war enemies. Wasn't that far after the war. It looked kind of funny, and it didn't have a lot of power. So they came up with the slogan, "Don't laugh. It's ugly, but it gets you there." All of a sudden, the perception went up. It became sort of a cult car. People bought this not because they wanted to go fast, but because they wanted to be part of this honest car. This car that admits it's not the prettiest, doesn't go the fastest, but daggone it, it's very reliable. Who else does this? We look at statements against self-interest. What are some potential weaknesses for your product or service? What's the bright side to that weakness? Other folks have tapped into this. Avis, we try harder. Avis, car rental company, quickly realized that they were never going to surpass their arch enemy, Hertz Car Rental. Can you imagine those company meetings? You know, everybody cheer, we're number 2. I mean, that's kind of a tough spot to be in. But they turned it around and they said, because we're number 2, we try harder. What a great slogan. We try harder because we're number 2. Everybody remembers Smucker's. Smucker's Jam must be good with a name like that. There's several examples. There's an example of if you can't fix it, feature it. Some of the complaints early on for Heinz ketchup was it was hard to get out of the bottle. So they changed their slogan. It's slow good. They also sang the song Anticipation. It's worth waiting for. How much of your life do you want to spend waiting for ketchup? Kind of interesting. The third component in building credibility is building the liking effect. People are more likely to deal with people they like, but even more so from people who they know are like them. So we talk about building that liking effect. Think about your organization. Why do the stakeholders with whom you deal potentially think that you're not like them? What can they do? What can you do to change that perception? Do you sometimes intimidate the folks with whom you're trying to deal because maybe you dress a little nicer? Maybe you pick them up to take them out to dinner and you drive a little bit nicer car. You bring them over to the office to meet and they're sitting there going, wow, is that Corinthian leather? Because you know what? Back at our place, we use pleather. I mean, what are we doing to make sure that we're likable and that we're like them? The next one we talk about in the influencing process. We engage emotion. People buy on emotion and they justify it rationally. We start talking about how people buy on emotion. It's the emotion of achievement. Can I get something that I wasn't thinking I would get? Fear and obligation. So what are we talking about there? Well, the sense of achievement, the need to win. How many stakeholders do you deal with who need to be winners? Is there anything we can do to make sure that they are a winner? They're motivated by incentives. What incentives can you offer? You know what? Just a little bit more and you can be our #1 customer. You know what? You can be in the gold club. And I'm sure that'll satisfy you until we build the platinum club. And then maybe we'll let you into that. What incentives can you offer? The next one, fear. I have a picture of New Coke up there. People are motivated by scarcity. Anybody drink a New Coke lately? No, most of us haven't. If you remember in the 80s, they introduced New Coke. They done a lot of research. They proved in taste test after taste test that people preferred New Coke to the original formula. They introduced New Coke. Suddenly, the original formula was flying off the shelves. People wanted the original Coke because, you know what? They were afraid they couldn't get it anymore. People like regular Coke. It's been a long time since any of us have had a New Coke. Because you know what? People had a fear that they couldn't get something that they wanted. How can you create or reveal scarcity for your product or service? What scarcity can you introduce? Obligation, the need to have balance and fairness. That most people feel an obligation. In his fabulous book, The Psychology of Influence, Robert Cialdini talks about the need for the obligation, to meet obligations. And one of the experiments that he cites in the book is one that comes up every now and then, where they took 500 names at random and sent 500 holiday greeting cards to these individuals. Happy holidays to you and yours. They ended up getting over 100 responses back. Happy holidays to you too. From people they did not know. Kind of interesting. I said it comes up every now and then. Around the holidays, you'll often see an article in the newspaper because they're still getting letters. They're still getting cards from people. Boy, it's been a long time since we've heard from you. Happy holidays, person I do not know. Seems kind of interesting. What things can you do to create an obligation? Can you create an obligation with a small note? It doesn't have to be something large. Sometimes it's just an email when you send a link to a website that might remind you of that individual. Perhaps they're into this hobby, so you send them something based on that hobby. Creates that little need to reciprocate. Might be the need to reciprocate verbally, might be the need to reciprocate in some other way, but it creates an obligation. The next component, we talked about building credibility. We talked about engaging emotions. Demonstrating logic. I think that's the one where most of us are pretty powerful. How do you demonstrate logic? Well, there are 3 things we talk about there. Use documented proof. Here's the white paper. Here's the spec sheet. Now is the time for those things to come out. If we brought them out earlier, we probably were a little bit premature. Use social proof and communicate consequences. What do I mean by those? Well, use documented proof. What is available to you? You have a lot of documented proof available to you. How about the second one, social proof? People tend to follow a crowd, especially if the crowd is like them. Very famous sociological experiment. In New York City, they had an individual stand on the street corner and look up. They had one individual. People kept walking by. A lot of people saw this individual, and they thought to themselves, wow, that's a strange individual, just looking up in the sky. Then they put a group of 5 individuals, and all 5 individuals were looking up at the sky. Soon, they had a crowd that formed. Everybody was looking up at the sky. Because, you know, one individual is a crazy person. 5 individuals, there must be something up there. Kind of interesting. If you ever go into an elevator with a group of friends and a stranger walks in, see what happens if you all turn to your right and face the wall. I guarantee that individual is not going to be facing the door for very long. Quickly they'll turn. There must be something I'm missing. The next one we talk about, communicating natural, logical consequences. If you do or don't do what I'm asking, then something good or bad will happen, which makes sense because it's natural consequences. If, then, which makes sense. Look, if you can't give me the appointment next Thursday, then I'm going to have to move on to some of my other folks in the pipeline, which makes sense to me because we're not getting anywhere, which doesn't make sense for you because you're missing an opportunity. It's communicating those natural, logical consequences. Finally, we talk about the influencing process. We talk about agreement without action is merely a conversation. How do you get agreement without action? Well, part of the way we get a small yes, we provide options, and then we create a safety net. What I'd like to do right now, though, is I have a quick demonstration for you. What I'd like to do right now is I want to introduce something I call the dollar or the $20 bill auction. I have brought along with me, let's see if I can find it, a $20 bill, U.S. currency. And I'm going to have an auction right now, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to be the bidders. You can bid for this $20 bill. And the rules are the highest bidder will receive this $20 bill, regardless of their bid. The only other rule is the second highest bidder must also pay me their bid. So I'd like to open up bidding. Who'll give me $1 for this $20 bill? Anybody willing to give me $1? Thank you, sir. Anybody give me $2 for this $20 bill? Thank you. That's a good deal. Anybody give me $3 for this $20 bill? I got 3 right here. How about 4? Anybody go 4? 4 for this $20 bill? Still a good deal. Yes, thank you in the front row. How about 5? At 5, it's still good. How about 6? You'll go 6? Hey, that's a great deal. Anybody go 7? 20. You'll give me $20 for a $20 bill? That's crazy talk, giving me $20 for a $20 bill. You, ma'am, however, are going to give me $6 and get absolutely nothing. So I suggest if you go to 21, I will give you the $20 bill and you will only owe me $1. Do you want to go 21? Thank you. Now you, sir, offered me 20. You, sir, offered me $20 for this $20 bill, but she said 21. You can give me 22, only give me 2. I give you the $20, and she ends up holding the bag. You want to go 22? Absolutely, thank you. Now, in case you're following, 23, thank you. She's a quick study. Anybody want to give me 24? You want to give me 24? Yeah. Oh, we got 24. How about 25? Thank you. 26? I'll tell you what we'll do is I'll keep the $20 and nobody owes me anything. But isn't it interesting? If I told you this morning, I'm going to do a presentation and I'm going to get somebody to give me $26 for a $20 bill. Would you have believed it? Absolutely not. And yet, continually, I have gone as high as $50 for a $20 bill. Group was not as bright as you folks. But it's kind of interesting in this little exercise. Why was I able to do that? Well, you know, one of the reasons I was able to do that is I got a small yes. I didn't ask for $26 for a $20 bill. Anyone would have thought I was crazy. I asked for a mere $1. Anybody want to give me $1 for a $20 bill? Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. Get that small yes. The second one, provide options. Look, you had options. You could play or not play. A lot of you chose not to play. We had some options here. And then the third one, create a safety net. How many of you would have played along if I had said, and guess what? If you're not satisfied with the deal at the end, you don't have to go through with it. I think a lot of you would have been more likely to jump in and play the game. So get the small yes. What small yeses can you ask for with your key stakeholders? What small yeses can you ask for? People have a natural tendency to want to follow and be consistent in what they do. When they make a small yes, they're typically eager to follow through and make another yes. People don't like to contradict themselves. Small yeses are key. The second one, provide options. What options can you provide? People are moved to decisions when options are offered. They're most likely to accept a moderate offer. How can you shape your offer to be the moderate offer, the one that they're most likely to choose? You know, provide options. Isn't that great? Provide as many options as you can. Not exactly. In fact, in study after study, they have demonstrated that the correct number of options is 3. Why is it 3? Well, you know, companies have found, companies that offer 401k plans and they want all of their employees to participate in the beginning, they offered one option. 401k plan, here's your option. Participation levels were low. Soon, they said, well, we'll offer more options. So they offered 3 options. Participation levels went up. Then they said, well, if people like options and they like 3 options, let's offer more options. They offered more options, and suddenly participation went down. You know, originally people thought, well, I want to take care of my family, I'll participate. With 3 options, they said, this is even better, I have some choices. You know, with multiple options, they looked at it and thought to themselves, what am I, a stockbroker? I mean, why am I looking at all these options? 3 options, with the middle option being the most powerful. Create a safety net. If you can create a safety net, and I have a picture of the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. When building the Golden Gate Bridge, the first year of construction, they had a lot of accidents, a lot of mortalities. A lot of the workmen fell off the bridge and perished. So they came in and they said, well, let's stretch a safety net. Well, a lot of the people said, well, you know what, it's not cost effective. And I guarantee if we put that safety net under there, the workers are going to be careless and we're going to have more injuries. Well, they finally convinced them to put the safety net, and what they found was they had fewer injuries and accidents when there was a safety net. People were able to concentrate on their work rather than concentrating on not dying. People who have a safety net are much more likely to make a decision. Look, you've been very kind. We talk about our influencing process. Something we'd like to do on a regular basis, build credibility. People buy from people they like and people who are like them. Engage emotions. People buy on emotion, then they justify it rationally. Demonstrate logic. People need to understand the consequences of their action or inaction. And please don't forget, agreement without action is merely a conversation. If we can do all of those things, we can be more persuasive and influential to the stakeholders we see on a regular basis. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it for Jeff.
Thank you.